It all started with a jacket. Not just any jacket, but my favorite vintage leather bomber that I'd found at a thrift store in Brooklyn last fall. The kind with patches that tell stories I'd never lived, but somehow felt connected to. I'm Alex, by the way, 26, graphic designer, and until 3 months ago, I thought I had my roommate situation completely figured out. Jamie moved in last September after my previous roommate left unexpectedly for a job in Seattle. We connected through mutual friends, and from the beginning, everything just clicked. He's the kind of guy who remembers how you take your coffee and actually buys the right creamer when it's his turn to shop. Thoughtful in those small ways that make sharing a space with someone actually pleasant rather than just tolerable. Jamie works in finance, the kind of job where he leaves every morning in crisp button-downs and comes home loosening his tie with a sigh that seems to release the corporate persona he maintains all day. We're different in almost every way. While I spend weekends at gallery openings or hunched over my tablet working on freelance projects, he's either at the gym or watching sports with his college buddies. Classic straight guy stuff. Not that I was keeping track or anything. Our friendship developed organically. Late-night conversations over takeout, introducing each other to our favorite shows, the comfortable silence of two people existing in the same space without feeling the need to fill every moment with words. I never expected the jacket to change everything. But isn't that how these stories always go? The smallest things become turning points when you look back. It was a rainy Thursday in April. Jamie was running late for a dinner with clients, and his usual jacket was at the dry cleaners. I was sketching at the kitchen table when he rushed in, hair still damp from the shower, frustration evident in every movement as he searched for something to wear. "I'm so screwed," he said, running his hand through his hair for what must have been the 10th time. "The restaurant's across town, it's pouring, and I have nothing appropriate that's clean. I don't know what made me offer. Maybe it was the panic in his eyes, or maybe something deeper I wasn't ready to acknowledge. Try my leather jacket," I suggested, pointing to where it hung by the door. "It might work with what you're wearing." The surprise on his face was evident. We'd never shared clothes before, and my style was decidedly different from his. But desperation won out. "You sure?" he asked, already moving toward it. I nodded, watching as he slipped it on. Let me tell you what happens when someone tries on something that's distinctly yours. There's a moment of cognitive dissonance, like seeing your handwriting reproduced by someone else. The jacket that I'd worn countless times, that had molded to my shoulders and arms, now rested on Jamie's broader frame. And here's the thing, it looked good. Better than good. The worn leather somehow complemented his button-down perfectly, adding just enough edge to his otherwise polished appearance. "How does it look?" he asked, checking himself in the hallway mirror. There was a moment, just a flicker, where our eyes met in the reflection and something shifted. I couldn't quite name it then. "It works," I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady despite the strange flutter in my chest. "Keep it dry, though." He grinned, that crooked smile that always made our apartment feel warmer somehow. "You're a lifesaver," he said, grabbing his keys. "Don't wait up." I didn't expect him to come home wearing it, smelling faintly of rain and expensive whiskey. I didn't expect him to say, "This jacket is amazing." Every person at dinner commented on it. And I certainly didn't expect him to ask, "Can I borrow it again sometime?" with a hopefulness that made refusing impossible. "Sure," I said, ignoring the voice in my head questioning why this felt significant. "Anytime." What followed was a slow transformation. The jacket began migrating between our rooms. He'd wear it to meet friends, to weekend brunches, even just to run errands. Each time, he'd return with stories, how a barista complimented it, how his boss noticed the change in his style, how comfortable it felt. I started to see the jacket more on him than on myself. And strangely, I didn't mind. There was something about seeing him in something that was mine that sparked a complicated warmth I wasn't ready to examine too closely. 3 weeks after that first rainy Thursday, Jamie came home and hung the jacket in his closet instead of mine. He didn't mention it. I didn't either. It was a silent transfer of ownership that we both pretended not to notice. But I noticed. Of course I noticed. The jacket had become a bridge between our worlds, the artistic and the corporate, the queer and the straight, the expressive and the reserved. And somehow, in wearing something that was fundamentally mine, Jamie seemed to be trying on pieces of me too. Our apartment dynamic shifted subtly after that. Movie nights on the couch included less space between us. Conversations lingered longer, often stretching into the early morning hours. He'd ask more questions about my art, my perspective, my past relationships. I found myself looking forward to evenings at home in a way that felt dangerously close to longing. Friends started giving us knowing looks when we showed up to gatherings together. My best friend Sophia pulled me aside at a party and whispered, "What's happening with you and Jamie?" I dismissed her question with a laugh that didn't quite reach my eyes. Nothing. He's straight, remember? But was he? The question started to haunt me. There were moments, a touch that lasted too long, a glance that held something unspoken, the way he'd started to casually mention how attractive he found certain male celebrities. Small things that could mean everything or nothing at all. The jacket became a symbol in my mind, of possibility, of change, of the thin line between friendship and something more. One night, after we'd both had a few beers watching a basketball game I pretended to understand, Jamie turned to me with an expression I couldn't read. "This jacket," he said, tugging at the sleeve of what had once been mine. "It changed things for me." My heart hammered against my ribs as I waited for him to continue. "People see me differently when I wear it. I feel different." He paused, picking at the label on his beer bottle. It made me think about how much of who I am is just what I thought I was supposed to be. The weight of his words hung between us. I knew we weren't just talking about leather and patches anymore. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, afraid to break whatever spell had allowed this moment of vulnerability. He looked at me then, really looked at me, with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "I've been thinking a lot about expectations. What my parents wanted, what my friends expect, what I've always assumed about myself." I held my breath, not daring to hope, but hoping anyway. And the single word carried all my unspoken questions. Jamie's laugh was soft, almost self-deprecating. "And I'm not sure of anything anymore. Except that I like who I am when I'm with you. I like who I am in this jacket." He gestured to himself, to the borrowed item that had somehow become a catalyst. "Is that weird?" "No," I said, finding courage in his honesty. "It's not weird at all." We sat in silence for a moment, the television forgotten, the air between us charged with possibility. I decided to take a risk. "You know, if you want to keep the jacket, that's okay. It looks better on you anyway." It was my way of saying, "Take this part of me, I'm offering it freely." His smile then, slow, genuine, relieved, made my chest ache. "I was hoping you'd say that," he admitted. "But I don't just want the jacket, Alex." The sound of my name in his mouth felt different somehow, weighted with intention. He moved closer on the couch, the space between us now measured in inches rather than feet. "I think I want more." The kiss, when it happened, wasn't a surprise so much as an inevitability, the natural conclusion to a story that had been writing itself since that rainy Thursday. His hand found my face, hesitant at first, then more certain as I leaned into his touch. The jacket creaked slightly as he moved, the sound so familiar, yet now part of a new narrative. When we pulled apart, his eyes searched mine, looking for reassurance or perhaps permission to continue this rewriting of who we were to each other. "I've never done this before," he confessed, vulnerability evident in the slight tremor of his voice. "Been with a guy, I mean. But with you, it doesn't feel like I'm trying something new. It feels like I'm finally being honest." I understood then what the jacket had represented, not just a change in style, but a permission slip to explore parts of himself he'd kept carefully hidden, even from himself. "We can figure it out together," I told him, meaning it completely. No rush, no pressure. His relief was palpable, his forehead resting against mine in a gesture of trust that moved me more than the kiss had. "Thank you," he whispered. "For the jacket. For everything." The weeks that followed weren't without complications. Jamie had questions about his identity that I couldn't answer for him. There were awkward conversations with friends, tense calls with family members, moments of doubt that had us both questioning whether we'd made a mistake. But through it all, the jacket remained a touchstone, a reminder of how something as simple as borrowed clothing could open doors to authenticity neither of us had anticipated. 6 weeks after that first kiss, Jamie came home from work early. I was at my desk, deep in a design project, when I heard the door. He stood in the doorway of my room, our room, increasingly, holding a package. "I got you something," he said, the nervous excitement in his voice making me set aside my work immediately. Inside the box was a jacket, not identical to my old one, but similar in style, with different patches and a slightly darker leather. I thought you needed a replacement, he explained, since I've completely commandeered yours. The gesture touched me deeply, not just the gift itself, but the acknowledgement of our journey, the recognition that while some things had changed irrevocably, others could be restored or reimagined. I tried on the new jacket, modeling it with an exaggerated runway walk that made him laugh. How does it look? I asked, echoing his question from months ago. His eyes softened as he pulled me close. Like it was made for you, he said. Just like you were made for me. It would be neat to say that everything was perfect after that. That one article of clothing magically solved all our problems and answered all our questions. Reality is messy, eh? Jamie still struggles sometimes with labeling his sexuality, preferring to say he's just in love with Alex rather than adopting any particular identity. There are still family members who don't understand, friends who drifted away, moments of insecurity on both sides. But there's also a depth to our connection that I've never experienced before, a relationship built on the courage to try on different versions of ourselves and the patience to wait as we figure out which ones fit. The original jacket hangs in our shared closet now, a silent witness to our evolving story. Sometimes Jamie wears it, sometimes I reclaim it for an evening, and occasionally it stays on the hanger, a reminder rather than a necessity. Because the truth is, we don't need it anymore, not as a bridge or a symbol or a catalyst. What started with borrowed leather has transformed into something much more substantial, a shared life, constructed day by day, choice by choice, with the understanding that the most important things we can offer each other aren't possessions at all, but rather the freedom to be authentically ourselves. So if you're wondering whether a straight roommate trying on your jacket can really lead to love, I don't have a universal answer. But I can tell you this. Sometimes the smallest gestures open the biggest doors. Sometimes what looks like an ending, the loss of a favorite possession, is actually the beginning of something far more valuable. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person who's been right in front of you all along is exactly who you've been looking for. Jamie still wears that jacket more than I ever did. And now, I get to keep them both. Total_char_count, 13,026.